I stood in a courtroom at 72 years old, watching my own son point at me like I was his enemy. His finger trembled with anger as he spoke words that felt like knives. Words that erased a lifetime of sacrifice in a single breath. In that moment, I realized something terrifying. I was no longer his mother. I was an obstacle. Before we begin, a huge thank you to all of you. We've officially hit 500 subscribers. It's a small milestone, but a big deal for us. And now our eyes are set on the 1,000 subscribers goal. To help us get there, please hit the like button. Subscribe so you never miss a story. And let me know in the comments where you're watching from and how you're doing. Your support truly encourages us and keeps this channel going. Let's jump into the story. My name is Margaret. My hands were resting on the cold wooden table in front of the judge, shaking no matter how hard I tried to steady them. Across the room stood my son, Ryan, the boy I once stayed awake for during fevers, the child I protected with my own body during storms. Now, he wouldn't even look at me with recognition. "She's wasting what she doesn't deserve," Ryan said sharply. I barely recognized his voice. The judge flipped through papers.com and unreadable. Ryan's lawyer polished, confident, already victorious, and her eyes stood beside him like a shield. I felt small, exposed, humiliated. 6 months earlier, my life had been full. My husband Arthur was still alive, then weak, yes, battling cancer, but alive. We had been married for 45 years. We built everything together from nothing. One old truck, endless sleepless nights, cheap meals, big dreams. Arthur worked with his hands. I worked wherever I could, cleaning homes, bookkeeping, raising our son. Every sacrifice had a purpose. And slowly, painfully, that little trucking business became something real. Something stable. Something that fed dozens of families. Ryan grew up surrounded by love and opportunity. We gave him everything we never had. And for a long time, he was a good son. Until 3 years ago, when everything changed. Ryan met Genevieve. From the first moment she walked into our home, I felt it. The way her eyes measured the furniture. The way her smile never reached her eyes. The way she spoke kindly, but coldly. Like someone already counting what didn't belong to her. I wanted to believe I was wrong. But love makes parents blind. Arthur saw it before I did. And now, as I stood in that courtroom facing my son, I understood something far more frightening. Arthur didn't just leave behind a will. He left behind a test, and my son was about to fail it. What Ryan didn't know, what no one in that courtroom expected, was that I was about to say 3 words that would silence everyone and change his life forever. 6 months before that courtroom day, my world still revolved around one person. Arthur. Cancer had taken away his strength, but not his mind. He was thinner, quieter, yet his eyes still carried the same sharp intelligence I'd known for 45 years. We had learned long ago that love wasn't about easy days. It was about staying when everything hurt. I fed him his medicine. I helped him dress. On the worst nights, I held his hand while pain twisted his body. Whispering stories from our early years just to distract him. Stories about the first truck. The nights we survived on boxed pasta. The dream that somehow became real. Ryan visited, but not often. When he did, Genevieve stayed close. Always checking her phone, always glancing at her watch. Her presence filled the room with discomfort. She never offered to help. Never asked questions. She only observed. Calculated. One afternoon, 2 weeks before Arthur passed, he asked me to call our lawyer, Ruth. Ruth had been part of our lives for decades. She wasn't just legal counsel, she was family. When she arrived, Arthur asked for privacy. They stayed in the study for nearly 2 hours. I sat outside, listening to the low murmur of voices through the door, my stomach tight with unease. When Ruth finally came out, her eyes were wet. She hugged me tightly and whispered, "Trust your husband, even when you don't understand." Arthur died 3 days later at home, in our bed, his hand in mine. His final words still echo in my chest. Forgive me for what's coming, but it's necessary. The funeral was crowded. Employees, drivers, families whose lives Arthur had changed. Ryan stood beside Genevieve, dressed in black, silent. Not a tear fell from his eyes. A week later, Ruth returned with the will. I sat on the same couch where Arthur and I had planned our future, bracing myself. I expected something simple, everything to me. Then Ryan, but that wasn't what Arthur had written. Instead, Ruth read words that made my breath catch. Everything our company, our properties, our savings was placed in a trust, managed by me. Ryan would only receive his inheritance when I believed the time was right. Ruth paused, then added quietly, there are conditions. She didn't explain them fully. Only said, Arthur was very specific and very careful. When Ryan arrived days later for the official reading, he heard only one thing: that I was in control. I saw the change in his face immediately. And in Genevieve's eyes, something darker appeared. Something hungry. I didn't know it then, but that moment was when my son stopped seeing me as his mother and started seeing me as his enemy. After the will was read, silence settled between Ryan and me like a wall. At first, he still called. His voice sounded polite, almost careful, as if he were choosing each word. But something felt forced, hollow. He no longer asked how I was doing, only how the paperwork was going. Genevieve never called. Weeks passed. Then months. The house grew unbearably quiet. Arthur's coffee mug still sat beside the sink. His jacket still hung by the door. Sometimes I caught myself turning to speak to him, forgetting for a split second that he was gone. Ryan stopped visiting completely. When I did see him, it was always brief, always tense, always with Genevieve nearby, watching, measuring. One evening, nearly 2 months after the funeral, Ryan called unexpectedly. Mom, he said, Genevieve and I want you to come over for dinner. We need to talk. My heart lifted with foolish hope. I baked his favorite apple pizza. Same recipe I'd made since he was 10 years old. I imagined laughter, reconciliation, maybe even healing. Genevieve opened the door. Her smile never reached her eyes. Dinner was stiff, polite, cold. No one touched the pie. Halfway through the meal, Genevieve set her fork down with a sharp clink. Let's be honest, she said. This isn't about dinner. Ryan didn't stop her. We know Arthur left behind a lot, she continued calmly. The company, the properties, the accounts, and right now, you control everything. My stomach tightened. I'm following your father's wishes, I replied carefully. Genevieve scoffed. You're an elderly woman living alone in a house that's too big for you. What exactly do you need all that money for? I looked at Ryan, waiting, hoping. He stared at his plate. You never really worked, Genevieve added. Arthur built everything. You just stayed home. The words hit harder than a slap. I reminded her of the houses I cleaned, the nights I worked late, the years I spent keeping the company running while raising their son. That doesn't count, she said flatly. Anyone can cook and clean. Ryan finally spoke. Mom, just be reasonable. Reasonable. That was the moment I realized something had shifted inside him. I wasn't his mother anymore. I was standing between him and what he wanted. I left their house shaking, my pie untouched, my heart shattered. That night, I sat alone in my bedroom, staring at Arthur's photograph. Why did you do this? I whispered. But the dead don't answer. And some truths only reveal themselves when it's already too late. What I didn't know yet was that while I cried alone that night, my son was already preparing his next move. The weeks after that dinner felt heavier than grief. Ryan called only once to apologize for Genevieve's behavior. His words sounded practiced, as if he were reading from a script he didn't believe in. She was stressed, he said. You know how she is. I said nothing. What he didn't apologize for was staying silent, for letting his wife tear me apart while he watched. That silence hurt more than her insults. Then the call stopped. I threw myself into work, partly to survive the loneliness, partly to feel close to Arthur. The company office still smelled faintly of oil and paper. His desk was untouched. His handwriting was everywhere. Ruth helped me understand the financial side. And that's when I saw it. Loans. Not company loans. Personal loans. Ryan's name appeared again and again. Quiet payments Arthur had made over the last 2 years. Tens of thousands at a time. Always marked confidential. My hands trembled as I flipped through the documents. Why didn't he tell me? I asked Ruth. She sighed. Because he knew you'd protect Ryan at any cost. That night, I went through Arthur's study alone. Drawer by drawer. Folder by folder. Until I found a sealed envelope with my name written in his shaky handwriting. I knew before opening it that my life was about to change. Arthur's letter was gentle, loving, and devastating. He told me Ryan had gambling debts. Serious ones. That he had been paying them off quietly, hoping his son would stop. That Genevieve knew and encouraged it. Arthur wrote that he was afraid. Not of dying, but of what Ryan would become once the money was gone. I had to protect you, the letter said. Even from our son. I cried until my chest hurt. 3 weeks later, a courier arrived. The envelope was yellow. Inside was a court summons. Ryan was suing me. He wasn't asking for a share. He was demanding everything. The company, the accounts, the house, and worst of all, he was claiming I was mentally incompetent. I sat on the living room floor holding the papers, my hands numb, my heart hollow. Ruth arrived within hours. There's something you need to know, she said quietly. Arthur prepared for this. She opened her briefcase and showed me a clause I had never seen. If Ryan takes you to court, she said, he loses everything. I stared at her, unable to breathe. And Margaret, she added softly, there's more. I hired an investigator. What he found about Genevieve. She slid a folder across the table. I didn't open it yet. Some truths change everything forever. That night, staring at that unopened folder, I had to decide, should I protect my son, or finally let the truth destroy him? I didn't open the folder right away. It sat on the table for hours, untouched, like a silent threat. Part of me wanted to believe none of it was real, that my son was just confused, manipulated, scared. A mother's heart searches desperately for excuses. But deep down, I already knew. When I finally opened the folder, my hands were shaking. Inside were photographs, bank records, names. I didn't recognize casinos, hotels, credit cards maxed far beyond reason. Genevieve's past wasn't just troubling, it was patterned. 2 previous marriages. Both ended the same way. Financial ruin. Sudden disappearances. She hadn't chosen Ryan for love. She had chosen him because of Arthur. The room felt cold as I closed the folder. My son wasn't just greedy. He was drowning and he was pulling me under with him. 2 weeks remained before the court hearing. Ryan never called. Not once. No apology. No explanation. No hesitation. Instead, his lawyer contacted Ruth, cold, aggressive, confident. They would argue I was unfit, confused, a risk. I took their silence as my answer. On Ruth's advice, I visited 3 different neurologists. Full evaluations. Memory tests. Cognitive exams. I passed every one. Not because I wanted revenge, but because I refused to be erased. At night, I reread Arthur's letter. Some people don't want to be saved, he had written. That sentence hurt the most. The night before the hearing, I stood in front of the mirror longer than usual. I chose a simple dress Arthur always said made me look strong. I wasn't dressing to look young. I was dressing to look unbreakable. The courthouse was quiet when we arrived. Then I saw Ryan. He looked different, colder, harder, like someone who had already decided I was expendable. Genevieve walked beside him, heels clicking sharply, confidence radiating from her smile. She didn't look worried. She looked victorious. The hearing began. Their lawyer spoke first, painting Ryan as a devoted son and me as a confused old woman clinging to power. I didn't understand. They brought witnesses, strangers, people who claimed Arthur doubted me, claimed I forgot things, claimed I was unstable. Lies. Ryan took the stand. And then, he looked at me and said words I will never forget. She never really worked. She doesn't understand business. That was when something inside me finally went quiet. Not broken. Calm. Because I realized something important. Arthur hadn't just prepared a defense. He had prepared a truth bomb, and my turn to speak was coming. What Ryan didn't realize was that every lie he told was pushing him closer to a clause his father hoped would never be used. By the time my lawyer stood up, the courtroom already felt tilted against me. Ryan's lawyer had done her job well. She painted a picture of a fragile old woman clinging to control, refusing to let go. Each witness chipped away at my dignity. Each lie was delivered with confidence. And then Ryan spoke. He described me as controlling, manipulative, forgetful. He said I isolated his father, that I influenced the will while Arthur was weak, that I cut him out of decisions he deserved to be part of. I wanted to scream, but Ruth's hand tightened around mine. "Wait," she whispered. When Ryan finished, he didn't look relieved. He looked empty. Then it was my turn. I walked to the stand slowly, feeling every year of my age, but also every year of experience. I swore to tell the truth, placed my hand on the Bible, and looked straight at the judge. "My name is Margaret," I said. "I am 72 years old, and I am fully capable of standing here today." I explained my work, the houses I cleaned, the books I kept, the years I spent inside the company while raising a child and supporting a husband's dream. I submitted medical evaluations, cognitive exams, financial records. The judge studied them carefully. Ruth then presented the company's numbers. Under my management, profits had risen, debt was down, employees were secure. Silence filled the room. Ryan's lawyer looked uneasy for the first time. Then Ruth did something unexpected. She handed the judge a document no one else had seen. "The full will," she said. "Not the summary, the full version." The judge began to read. His expression changed. Ryan leaned forward, confused. Genevieve shifted in her seat. The judge looked up slowly. "There is a clause here," he said. "One that directly addresses this situation." My heart pounded. Ruth read it aloud. "If Ryan sued his mother, attempted to declare her incompetent, or used legal force to take control, he would permanently lose all rights to the inheritance, forever." Ryan stood up. "That's not possible," he said. "My father wouldn't do that to me." The judge raised a hand. "He already did." The room went silent. I stood. "I didn't inherit money," I said softly. "I inherited responsibility." I explained Arthur's test, his fear, his hope. I watched my son's face crumble as realization spread. This wasn't punishment. It was consequence. Genevieve began whispering frantically. Ruth wasn't finished. She presented financial records, gambling debts, credit card balances, predatory lenders, then photographs. Genevieve with another man. Ryan stared. Broke. The judge called for a recess. 30 minutes. Ryan sat motionless. Genevieve tried to leave. I stayed where I was, because I knew, when the judge returned, nothing would ever be the same again. As the courtroom emptied for recess, I realized the verdict wouldn't just decide who owned the money, it would decide who my son truly was. The courtroom felt smaller when the judge returned. No one spoke. Even the air seemed heavy, as if it knew what was coming. Ryan sat with his head lowered, hands clenched together. The confident man who had walked in that morning was gone. In his place was someone fragile, exposed. Genevieve's seat was empty. She never came back after the recess. The judge adjusted his glasses and cleared his throat. "I have reviewed all evidence," he said, "including the full will of Arthur Miller." Every word echoed. He spoke calmly, but his tone carried weight. He described the will as deliberate, precise, and legally airtight. Arthur had not acted out of anger or confusion. He had acted out of foresight. Then the judge turned to Ryan. "Mr. Miller, this court finds that by filing this lawsuit, you activated the very clause your father created to test your character." Ryan's shoulders collapsed. "The court therefore dismisses your claim in its entirety." The gavel struck. Once. Final. Ryan had lost everything. He didn't argue. Didn't shout. He just sat there, staring at the floor, as if the ground had disappeared beneath him. People began to leave quietly. Ruth placed a gentle hand on my shoulder, whispering that it was over. But for me, it wasn't. Ryan looked up at me, then really looked at me. His eyes were red, hollow, filled with regret too late to save him. "I didn't know," he said hoarsely. "I swear. I didn't know." I walked toward him, despite Ruth's warning. "I know," I replied softly. "But your father did." That was when Genevieve's absence finally made sense to him. "She's gone," he whispered. I nodded. "She was never here for you," I said. "Only for what she thought you could give her." Ryan covered his face with his hands. "I ruined everything," he said. "I lost you. I lost Dad. I lost myself." My heart ached, but it didn't break. "Some lessons cannot be learned gently." "I still love you," I told him. "But love doesn't erase consequences." He nodded, finally understanding. We walked out of the courthouse separately. The sun was bright, almost cruel in its normalcy. In the days that followed, I made my decision. I restructured the company to protect every employee. I created a trust, so no single person, including me, could destroy what Arthur built. I donated a portion of the money to addiction recovery programs, hoping it might save someone else's family. Ryan disappeared for a while. Then, weeks later, he came to my door. Not to ask for money. Just to say one thing: "I'm sorry." What Ryan didn't realize was that the apology wasn't the end of his story. It was only the beginning of his hardest test. Ryan stood at my door like a stranger. Gone were the expensive clothes. Gone was the confidence. His shoulders were slumped, his face thinner, marked by exhaustion and regret. He didn't step inside right away. He waited like a child, unsure whether he was still welcome. "I'm not here to ask for anything," he said quickly. "Not money. Not forgiveness." I stepped aside and let him in. We sat in the living room where he'd grown up. The same couch. The same family photos. He stared at the floor for a long time before speaking again. "I lost everything," he said quietly. Genevieve left the same day she realized there was no inheritance. I sold what I could to pay part of my debts. I still owe more than I can handle. I listened. I didn't interrupt. "I got a job," he continued. "Driving trucks. Long hours. Hard work." His voice cracked. "Dad used to do that, didn't he?" "Yes," I replied. "He did." Ryan swallowed hard. "I finally understand why he did what he did," he said. "If I'd gotten that money, I would have destroyed myself. You didn't ruin my life, Mom. You stopped me from ending it." Tears filled his eyes, real ones this time. "I don't expect you to trust me," he said. "I don't even expect you to forgive me. I just needed you to know. I'm trying to become better." I looked at my son, really looked at him. "I can't erase what happened," I said gently. "What you did broke something between us. Healing takes time." He nodded. "I know. But," I added, "change is measured in actions, not words. Keep doing the work. Keep choosing the hard road." He stood to leave, then paused at the door. "Dad was right," he said softly. "About everything." After he left, The house felt quiet but not empty. Months passed. The company flourished under the new trust. Employees worked with pride. Arthur's name became known not just for success but for integrity. I lived simply, peacefully. One evening, I found a final letter Arthur had hidden inside our wedding album. "The greatest inheritance," he wrote, "is not money, it's wisdom. And sometimes, the greatest act of love is saying no." I folded the letter and smiled through tears. Arthur had been right. So had the will. And so, finally, was I. If you've ever been betrayed by family over money, remember this. Money reveals character, and dignity is worth more than any inheritance. If this story touched your heart, tell me in the comments, what city are you watching from? Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this story so more people remember. No matter how old you are, it's never too late to stand up for yourself.